In the midst of this fast-paced existence, where our destinies intertwine daily with crowds of people of varying natures and temperaments, we often find ourselves in an inevitable confrontation with that which disturbs our peace of mind. Hurtful words, provocative behaviors, and situations that seem purpose-built to test our patience follow one after another. Faced with this human tide, the average person stands defenseless, tossed about by the waves of anger and annoyance, becoming a prisoner to their emotions and reactions toward others. Here, Stoic philosophy emerges not as an escape from reality, but as an impregnable fortress built within the soul. It invites us to change our perspective on anger and annoyance, not as natural reactions to which we must surrender, but as choices we can reevaluate. Stoicism does not promise us a world devoid of annoying people. Rather, it grants us the shield that makes their arrows fall away without scratching our souls. 1. The dichotomy of control. Discovering the sacred space between stimulus and response. The path to escaping the trap of anger begins with realizing a fundamental truth upon which Stoic thought rests, known as the dichotomy of control. In this life, we do not possess absolute control over what happens to us, nor can we direct people's tongues or change their natures. However, we have complete authority over one thing only: how we think and act regarding what happens. The external world is teeming with triggers, from a passing word spoken with or without intent, to programmed behaviors and social conditioning that force themselves upon us. Yet there is always that separating space between the external stimulus, people's words and actions, and the internal response, our anger or calmness. In this delicate and momentary space lies our true freedom. Paying attention to this space gives us the ability to choose our response wisely, rather than slipping into the abyss of blind emotion and automatic reactions that we often regret later. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Epictetus, a biological reality when the body precedes the mind. But to be fair and practical in our philosophical approach, we must not overlook the reality of human nature and its complexities. The advice to choose your reaction seems simple on the surface, but in reality, it is a daunting challenge. We are not merely abstract rational minds. We are governed by bodies and nervous systems. Often, controlling a response is not a conscious decision that can be made at the push of a button. The autonomic response. In cases of trauma, panic attacks, or when exposed to triggers linked to old psychological wounds, the autonomic nervous system responds faster than logical thinking. The chemical rush. Adrenaline flows, and our senses prepare for defense or attack before the information even reaches the cerebral cortex responsible for consciousness and analysis. Therefore, applying this Stoic wisdom is not achieved merely by intellectual conviction. It requires continuous training and deep self-awareness. Expanding that space between stimulus and response is the result of meditation practices, somatic awareness, and perhaps therapeutic intervention to dismantle programmed neural responses. The true Stoic today is one who has compassion for their own humanity, realizing that calmness is not merely an idea we embrace, but a muscle we train day after day. 2. Ceasing to reshape others. The trap of expectations and the illusion of conformity. Having realized the importance of that sacred space within ourselves, we must now turn our gaze outward, toward the primary source of those triggers, others. The next step in building our Stoic fortress is not about how to repel people's attacks, but about dismantling the illusion that makes their actions seem like attacks in the first place. This illusion boils down to our deep-seated and sometimes naive desire for people to be exact copies of ourselves. The knockout blow, projecting the self onto the world. One of the deepest roots of human anger stems from expectations. We instinctively tend to evaluate others' behaviors using our own moral compass and personal ruler of values. We expect them to act with the same nobility we think we possess, reason with the same logic that governs our minds, and return favors the same way we do. And when they defy these expectations, which they inevitably will, we receive what might be called the knockout blow. This blow is not only impossible to avoid under such premises, but it is entirely of our own making. Expecting the world to conform to our perceptions is tantamount to declaring war on reality, a war we are bound to lose. Stoic philosophy teaches us that complaining about the betrayal of a deceitful person or the rudeness of a coarse one is equivalent to complaining that fire is hot or ice is cold. Accepting others' personalities as they are, with all their contradictions and flaws, is the most effective strategy for warding off disappointment. It is a crucial shift from trying to combat human nature to understanding its inevitabilities. Acceptance as a proactive strategy. From here, Stoic thought offers us a new strategy for dealing with the future horizons of our relationships. This strategy is based on proactive psychological preparation, akin to the Stoic exercise of premeditatio malorum, or the negative visualization of evils. When you wake up in the morning, remind yourself that you will meet the meddler, the ungrateful, the arrogant, and the selfish. This is not vision-clouding pessimism, but a protective realism that lights the way. When you expect diversity, differences, and even the bad in human nature, you strip their actions of the element of shocking surprise. Annoyance becomes a fated, unjustified option because the event has already been assimilated into your worldview beforehand. With this acceptance, you stop trying to save others from their flaws and stop playing the reformer, seeking to mold humanity in your image. Instead, you reach a state of profound peace with what is, rather than fighting for what should be. Empathy, the bridge between the inner fortress and the world. But here we must pause at a dangerous slippery slope. This Stoic acceptance might be misunderstood as a call for apathy, building isolating walls of emotional ice around the self, or adopting a purely individualistic stance under the banner of, "I protect myself, and to hell with the rest." This interpretation overlooks a fundamental essence in human nature and in the philosophy itself: the importance of empathy. Profound Stoicism does not detach individuals from their community. Rather, it reconnects them to it in a healthier way. When we realize that others do not act against us personally, but are driven by their own motives, deep fears, and perhaps ignorance of what is good for themselves and others, anger melts away, replaced by understanding and sometimes even compassion. People do not err because they are inherently evil, but because they lack wisdom, as Socrates and the Stoics after him believed. They are captives to their own flawed perceptions of happiness. When you realize this truth, you not only stop expecting the impossible from them, but you also begin to practice deep understanding. It is this understanding that prevents you from closing yourself off. Instead of withdrawing, empathy urges us to communicate effectively. We build bridges not to cross over to others and change them, but to meet them halfway. Empathy makes us realize that the person screaming in your face might be fighting a fierce internal battle you know nothing about. This philosophical awareness does not minimize the harm they cause, but it empties it of its toxic charge aimed at your pride. Thus, Stoicism transforms from a shield protecting you from stabs into a balm that heals and strengthens relationships, grounded in cognitive tolerance and emotional maturity rather than defensive isolation. 3. Breaking free from the prison of the righteous ego. Between intellectual humility and the courage of conviction. Having laid the foundations of empathy and tamed our expectations of others, we arrive at a highly delicate station in our Stoic journey toward tranquility. A station that requires us to turn the mirror of criticism upon ourselves with piercing honesty. Often, annoyance does not stem from a real injury we have suffered, but from a narcissistic wound to our pride. Here lies the third challenge: letting go of the urgent need to prove that we are always right. The illusion of victory, the arena of conflict that drains the soul. Observe your daily conversations and passing discussions. How often does a simple dialogue turn into a battlefield? How often have you felt your heart race and your voice rise, not in defense of a fateful cause, but merely to prove the other party wrong on a trivial detail? Pathological clinging to being right is, in essence, a malicious game played by the ego. It is a desperate attempt to tie our self-worth to the correctness of our opinions. Stoic philosophy views this clinging as a gratuitous and tragic drain on our vital energy. Energy that would be better invested in cultivating our virtues. When you enter an argument with a preconceived intention to crush the other's opinion and prove your intellectual superiority, you create futile, pointless conflicts, sow seeds of resentment, and sacrifice your inner peace on the altar of an imaginary victory. The winner of a narcissistic argument is, in reality, the loser of their own tranquility. Intellectual humility here requires recognizing that the truth is vast, and that our angle of vision, no matter how piercing it seems, remains limited and fallible. To say, perhaps you are right, in a passing debate that does not touch the core of your life is a great victory over the self and a giant leap toward inner peace. The fine line between intellectual humility and moral passivity. Here we face a serious philosophical and practical dilemma. Does Stoicism call us to absolute neutrality? Does letting go of the need to be right mean letting go of the truth itself? Do we swallow our tongues and stand idly by in the face of grave error or blatant injustice under the pretext of maintaining our calm? The definitive answer is no. Slipping from intellectual humility into absolute passivity or intellectual surrender is a betrayal of the very essence of Stoic philosophy, which considers justice and courage among its four cardinal virtues. There are situations where silence is not humility, but complicity. When a discussion touches upon fundamental moral issues, such as defending the rights of the vulnerable, like animal welfare, and protecting them from human abuse, or when it relates to strict professional and methodological standards in the workplace, where an error could lead to disaster, injustice, or a waste of resources, shifting towards silence is an evasion of responsibility. Absolute withdrawal from defending what is right in these contexts does not grant us psychological immunity. Rather, it grants the error immunity to continue and spread. The courage of conviction without emotion. How to defend the truth without losing your composure. The dilemma then lies in how to strike a balance. How do we fiercely defend the truth without falling into the trap of ego and anger? Stoic thought offers us a brilliant solution in the form of separating the principle from the ego. When you defend a just cause or a correct methodology, your defense must stem from your deep respect for the truth itself, not from a desire to defeat the person standing before you. You are not a warrior seeking personal glory. You are a guardian of an objective value. This mental separation radically changes the nature of the dialogue. Your tone becomes firm but not aggressive, clear but not insulting. You present the argument and fight for it with cool objectivity and strict rationality, offering evidence without considering the other's rejection of it as a personal insult. If the other party rejects the clear truth out of stubbornness, the Stoic realizes they have performed their moral duty with courage, and that the other's persistence in their delusion falls within the realm of what we cannot control, the dichotomy of control mentioned earlier. With this profound understanding, we gain the ability to distinguish between arguing for the sake of the ego, which we must rise above and abandon, and debating for the sake of a principle, which we must engage in with honor and calmness, refusing to let falsehood pass unchallenged while simultaneously keeping our inner fortress impervious to reckless emotional reactions. 4. Existential independence, disentangling your self-worth from the tribunals of others. Having freed ourselves in the previous station from the trap of ego that drives us to prove we are right in every argument, a deeper layer of human fragility reveals itself to us. This is the urgent and often painful need to feel appreciated. The violent annoyance that strikes our depths when someone criticizes or ignores us does not actually stem from the words spoken, but rather from a fatal strategic error in how we construct our sense of self. We have handed the keys to our self-worth over to others. The courts of illusion, people's opinions as reflections of their distortions. From a tender age, we are socially and culturally programmed to be creatures seeking applause. We learn to see our reflection through the eyes of others. If they smile at us, we feel the fullness of our existence, and if they frown, our internal structure collapses. Stoic philosophy intervenes here with a surgeon's scalpel to eradicate this intellectual tumor, telling us an absolute truth. People's opinions are not universal facts, but merely vague and temporary impressions. When someone passes judgment on you, they are not actually talking about you. They are talking about their distorted version of you, the version that has passed through the filters of their experiences, their fears, their mood in that moment, and even their level of consciousness. The one who insults or belittles you is merely expressing their own internal chaos, and the one who elevates you to the status of gods might be driven by their own psychological need or a false infatuation. How then can a rational person tie their most precious possession, their human worth, to a fluctuating indicator like human moods? How ridiculous it is not to flee from one's own faults, which is possible, while striving to flee from the faults and judgments of others, which is impossible. Marcus Aurelius' emancipation from the slavery of popular culture. Applying this principle is tantamount to a declaration of spiritual independence. It is a rebellion against the slavery of modern popular culture, which has reduced human worth to numbers measured by likes, follows, and approving glances in public spaces. The Stoic builds their own mint within their soul. They are the ones who print their own value, and they determine the standards of their success and failure based on their commitment to personal virtues, like honesty, justice, and wisdom, not on the applause of the crowd. This emancipation makes you immune to anger. If someone insults you, and you know with absolute certainty that their words do not diminish your truth in the slightest, their words fall to the ground before they can touch your dignity. You become like a mountain, unharmed by storms, its solid rock formation unchanged. The opposite trap, fatal isolation and rejecting feedback. However, as we have established throughout this essay, we must shed light on the dark corners we might slip into if we misunderstand this philosophy. A superficial reading of the principle of indifference to the opinions of others could create a social monster, an apathetic, arrogant, or isolated individual in an ivory tower who rejects any communication or criticism. The inevitability of belonging, man as a social being. We must not overlook a firmly established biological and evolutionary fact. We are inherently social creatures. Our brains are designed to connect with others, build communities, interact, and share. The early Stoic philosophers understood this well and called it the concept of oikiosis, affinity or belonging to the whole of humanity. We are parts of one body, and the absolute deprivation of social connection or adopting a hostile, condescending attitude toward everything people say does not lead to strength. Rather, it leads to pathological isolation, depression, and the erosion of the soul. The compass of balance between begging for validation and receiving evaluation. The proper equation, then, does not lie in turning a deaf ear to human voices, but in changing how we process these voices within our minds. Herein lies the fundamental difference between the unhealthy search for validation and the healthy reception. When a colleague advises you that your performance was poor, or when your life partner tells you that your reaction was harsh, the fake Stoic will ignore the matter, saying, "I don't care about your opinions. My value comes from within." This is arrogance and blindness. The true Stoic, however, listens attentively and accepts criticism as useful information for course correction and self-development, without ever allowing this information to shake their belief in their worth as a human being. You listen to others to improve your actions, not to derive your justification for existence from them. With this delicate balance, you remain connected to people, warm in your relationships, and able to utilize the mirror of society to refine yourself. Yet at the same time, you remain free, an absolute master of your inner fortress, which people's opinions may only enter with your permission. 5. Engineering fortresses, the art of setting personal boundaries with calm strictness and assertive communication. After having built the pillars of our existential independence in the previous chapters, freed our self-worth from the guillotines of others' opinions, and abandoned the exhausting ego of proving we are always right, we now reach the external arena of human interaction. Reaching this level of inner tranquility does not mean in any way that we leave the doors of our souls wide open to every passerby. Nor does it mean turning into public property where our energy and time are violated under the guise of tolerance or excessive acceptance. Here, an indispensable existential necessity in practical Stoic philosophy emerges: the engineering of personal boundaries. An impenetrable fortress needs high walls and gates that open and close with wisdom, and so does the human soul. Much of the annoyance and anger that squeezes us does not actually stem from the bad intentions of others, but from the absence of those clear, red lines that regulate the distance between us and them. The myth of selfishness, protecting the spring before it dries up. For decades, flawed social upbringing has implanted in us a distorted idea that setting boundaries is a form of selfishness, and that the noble, giving person is one who keeps their door open and prioritizes others' needs over their own until their dying breath. This sickly romantic perception is a precise recipe for nervous breakdown and the generation of the worst kind of suppressed anger: resentment. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, who wrote extensively on the shortness of life and the wasting of time, alerts us to a strange paradox in human behavior. A person might fight fiercely to protect their material possessions from theft, yet they allow anyone to rob them of their most precious belongings, their time, psychological energy, and inner peace. Setting boundaries is not selfishness at all. Rather, it is the highest degree of personal responsibility and healthy awareness. The metaphor of the full cup here is not just a literary simile. It is a fact of health and psychology. You cannot pour for others from an empty cup. If you deplete your energy trying to please everyone, agreeing to every request, and enduring every transgression, you will ultimately offer those around you nothing but fatigue, agitation, and bitterness. Protecting your energy by drawing strict boundaries is intrinsically a moral act. You maintain your balance to remain a healthy human being, capable of true giving and practicing virtue, instead of turning into an angry victim blaming the world for depleting them. The dilemma of resentment. Anger born of imaginary lines. Here we must face a harsh truth. When you do not set clear boundaries, you lose your Stoic right to be angry when people cross them. How can you be furious at someone for invading your personal space if you were the one who left the door unhinged? Much of our daily annoyance is actually anger directed at ourselves, projected onto others. We get angry because we were too weak to say no. We get angry because we compromised at the expense of our comfort. This suppressed anger, resentment, accumulates like a slow poison that kills relationships. Therefore, drawing boundaries is the most important preventive measure to stop this type of anger from forming. It is a transparent social contract in which you tell the world, these are the conditions of my presence with you, and this is what I can tolerate. The skill of assertive communication. How to say no with Stoic tranquility. We now arrive at the major dilemma and practical application. If we are convinced of the importance of boundaries, why do we fail to set them? The reason lies in our lack of the skill of assertive communication. The vast majority of people swing between two destructive extremes when trying to protect their space. Passive submission, silence, and swallowing the pain to avoid conflict. Aggressive attack, exploding in the face of others, shouting and throwing accusations in self-defense. Both are emotional reactions incompatible with Stoic rationality. Assertive communication is that golden path between submission and aggression. It is the ability to express your needs, positions, and boundaries with absolute clarity and high confidence, but with complete respect for the other party and without a shred of anger or agitation. When a Stoic sets a boundary, they do not do so to punish or reprimand the other, but as an acknowledgement of an internal reality, with the same calmness as telling you that it is raining today. Social intelligence in boundary engineering. Applying assertive communication requires high social intelligence, relying on several pillars to ensure the message is delivered without setting the relationship on fire. First, depersonalization and using I statements. When someone forces you to justify your position or interferes in your affairs in a way that bothers you, the usual aggressive response is, "You are interfering in what doesn't concern you. You are draining me." This response backs the other into a corner of counterattack. Stoic social intelligence dictates using I messages that express your boundaries. You might calmly say, "I do not feel comfortable discussing this private matter. I prefer we keep our conversation professional." Here you haven't attacked their person, you've simply announced your own fence. Second, cold strictness, free of excessive justification. Many of us feel guilty when setting boundaries, sliding into a long string of excuses and justifications to convince the other party of our right to say no. Assertive philosophy teaches us that no is a complete sentence in itself. You can offer a brief, polite reason, but over-justifying gives an impression of a weak position and opens the door to negotiations and arguments that consume your energy. Be clear, concise, and as firmly rooted as an oak tree. Third, separating the setting of the boundary from the other's reaction. This is the greatest application of the dichotomy of control with which we began our journey. Your moral and existential duty ends at communicating your boundaries politely and firmly. This is what is within your control. As for how the other person will receive this boundary, will they get angry? Will they feel insulted? Will they call you cruel? This falls entirely outside your control. Social intelligence lies in allowing others to feel upset by your boundaries without intervening to rescue them from this feeling, and without retreating from your position to please them. Setting boundaries in a refined and assertive manner is the highest degree of self-respect, and it is simultaneously a respect for the relationship itself, because you are establishing the rules that ensure its continuation in a healthy environment free of grudges and irritants. When people realize that your doors have sturdy locks and the keys are in your hands alone, they will politely learn how to knock, and you will find that the space of anger and annoyance in your life has shrunk to an extent that your heart expands to the vastness of true existence. 6. Dissecting the lenses. Between freedom from personalization and receiving the mirror of loved ones. After establishing the walls of our impenetrable fortress through the engineering of personal boundaries, and learning how to guard the gates of our energy with calm strictness, we must realize an inescapable reality. No matter how strong our walls are, words will still seep through to us. We do not live in a vacuum, and boundaries do not mean absolute deafness. Here we transition from the stage of repelling harm to the stage of decoding, meaning how we process and analyze the opinions and comments that cross our gates. The sixth challenge in the Stoic philosophy of dealing with annoyance lies in understanding the lens theory, achieving absolute liberation from the plague of personalization, while maintaining a vigilant insight that distinguishes between the poisoned arrows of abuse and the healing scalpel of constructive criticism wielded by loved ones. The illusion of centrality. Why do we take things personally? The fastest route to anger and psychological misery is believing that you are the axis around which the actions and words of others revolve. Human pride, the ego, possesses a pathological tendency to make the self the sole hero or the targeted victim in every narrative. If a passing driver yells at you, your pride whispers that they intend to insult you personally. If a colleague ignores you in the office hallway, your mind translates this dismissal as a direct judgment on your insignificance. This cognitive trap, where we take every little thing personally, stems from a profound ignorance of human nature. The deep and simultaneously shocking Stoic truth is this: you are not the intended target of most of what people say and do. The anger they direct at you, the criticism they hurl your way, or even the neglect they practice rarely stems from your true reality. Rather, it always, in all its details, stems from their own lenses. Dissecting the lenses, their words are their silent confessions. To break free from this annoyance, Stoics invite us to contemplate how humans perceive the world. None of us sees reality in its raw, abstract form. Instead, we look at it through complex psychological lenses. These lenses have been polished over years of childhood, traumas, fears, beliefs, victories, and defeats. Even in the present moment, these lenses are tinted by a person's mood, the amount of sleep they had, and their level of anxiety about the future or regret over the past. When someone utters a harsh word toward you, they are not actually describing you. They are describing the scene they see through their own scratched glass. They are projecting their internal chaos, their failures, and their unresolved fears onto your screen. The person who constantly accuses you of falling short might be battling a deep sense of inadequacy within themselves. The person who mocks your dreams is merely speaking with the voice of their own inability to achieve theirs. With this profound philosophical understanding, the insults of others transform from piercing arrows into analytical data. You become the calm observer rather than the reactive victim. When you realize that their words are merely a report on their psychological state and not a judgment on you, the anger evaporates. There is no longer any justification for annoyance. Instead, you might feel genuine compassion for this being struggling under the weight of their distorted lenses. Emancipation from personalization is like taking off a tight garment that was suffocating our souls, allowing us to breathe the cold, pure air of truth. What people say is their exclusive property, and it has nothing to do with us. The hidden danger in the shield of absolute indifference. However, as is our custom in these philosophical discussions, we must beware of turning the medicine into poison. An extreme and flawed understanding of the idea that it's just their lenses could create a new narcissistic monster within us. A person might use this idea as a blind shield to deflect any advice and as an excuse to evade all responsibility for their mistakes. If we categorize every word directed at us as a psychological projection from the other, we close the door to development and assassinate the opportunity to elevate ourselves. Stoicism is not a call to hollow arrogance that refuses to listen. It is a call to filtered listening that distinguishes the good from the bad. Stoic alchemy, distinguishing between abuse and constructive criticism. Here lies the toughest challenge, which is the skill of meticulous sorting. How do we differentiate between someone pouring their psychological venom into us and someone holding up a lamp so we can see the flaws our ego blinds us to? The distinction requires total vigilance, prosauche in Stoic philosophy, relying on two fundamental criteria. First, the identity and intentions of the speaker. Who is holding the scalpel? Criticism that comes from a passing stranger, a competitor harboring a grudge, or a person known for negativity and spreading frustration, is mostly the product of their distorted lenses and a veiled abuse that is not worth dwelling on. However, criticism that comes from loved ones, from loyal friends, sincere teachers, or a life partner whose concern for your well-being has been proven over time, is criticism that must not be rejected. A true loved one is like a clear, unblemished mirror. They do not seek to project their complexes onto you, but rather aim to alert you to the blind spots in your personality and behavior. Rejecting their advice under the pretext that "I don't care about the opinions of others" is not independence. It is moral suicide and a break from wisdom. Second, the nature and content of the message. Between demolition and construction, abuse always targets being and identity. The annoying or abusive person attacks who you are a failure, you are stupid, you are useless. These are sweeping, hurtful phrases that offer no way out, aimed at shattering the spirit so the abuser can feel superior. In contrast, constructive criticism targets action and behavior. A sincere loved one does not attack yourself. They highlight your performance. Your behavior in that situation was hasty. Your methodology in this work needs adjustment. Your reaction carried unjustified harshness. Constructive criticism gives you an action plan for improvement and does not leave you drowning in the mud of inferiority. Embracing the scalpel of truth with courage. When you realize that what you are hearing is constructive criticism from a sincere loved one, Stoic philosophy asks you to do something exceedingly difficult: to swallow your pride completely. No matter how wrapped in love the criticism is, it stings the ego and scratches one's vanity. Your first instinct will drive you to defend yourself, invent justifications, or even counterattack. But the Stoic sage takes a deep breath, stops this internal rebellion, and opens their mind asking, what is the element of truth in these words? Listening to sincere advice and applying it requires courage, far greater than the courage to face enemies, because here you are facing your fiercest enemy, your ignorance of your own flaws. When your loyal friend tells you that your tone was condescending, do not reply that it is just their opinion. Rather, thank them for providing this valuable report on your misguided behavior. The brilliant balance lies at the heart of this equation: to be like a solid rock in the face of insults that reflect nothing but the misery of their owners, so we do not take them personally, and at the same time, to be like a highly absorbent sponge in the face of the constructive criticism gifted to us by loved ones as a lifeline to pull us from our unawareness. With this conscious sorting, we transform the entire external world, whether it loves us or opposes us, into a free training ground where we polish our virtues and elevate our wisdom day by day. 7. The eloquence of stillness. Silence as a Stoic weapon to absorb the storm and the dilemma of cultural interpretation. Having learned how to dissect the lenses of others and escape the trap of personalization, we now stand on the direct front line. The moment the spark of provocation ignites and fragments of anger fly toward us from the other party, an ancient instinctive call rises within us, urging us to retaliate, to seek verbal revenge, and to assert our presence by raising our voices and preparing verbal ammunition. Here in the heart of this blazing battle, Stoic philosophy presents us with the most elevated and arduous choice for the human soul: to choose silence. Not the silence born of helplessness, but the silence that represents the highest degree of control, the most cunning and effective weapon to neutralize any attack, while keeping our awareness alive to the cultural complexities that may surround this stillness. The chemistry of anger. Why is silence the antidote to provocation? To understand the genius inherent in responding with silence, we must first understand the chemistry of anger and the nature of provocation. An angry person, or one seeking to provoke you, is like a raging fire. Like any fire in nature, it needs oxygen and fuel to continue expanding and burning. The fuel for others' anger is your reactions, your justifications, your emotions, and your words clashing with theirs. When someone provokes you, they are essentially throwing a flaming ball at you, expecting, even needing you to catch it and throw it back so the game can continue and the drama of the situation can escalate. The wise Stoic understands this dynamic precisely. Instead of being the firewood thrown into the furnace of others, they choose to be the cold vacuum that does not conduct heat. Silence works like magic here. It completely absorbs the kinetic energy of the attack. When you face someone's screaming and transgressions with absolute stillness and a calm gaze, you cut off the vital supply keeping them ignited. The provocateur finds themselves shouting into an echoless valley, striking water with a sword that leaves no mark. Soon their anger rebounds upon them, eating them from the inside out due to the lack of resistance. Neutralizing provocation is not achieved by presenting a stronger argument, but by refusing to step onto the battlefield in the first place, leaving the opponent wrestling with the ghosts of their own anger on an audience-less stage. Building the inner fortress. Silence as a spiritual practice. From an internal perspective, silence is not a state of passivity or nothingness. Rather, it is a positive action requiring immense mental and nervous effort. In the first moments of silence in the face of provocation, you will feel armies of words crowding your throat and your blood boiling as it demands justice for your wounded pride. Restraining these armies and forcing your lips shut is the greatest victory you can achieve over yourself. In those silent seconds, you are not ignoring the situation. You are practicing the highest degrees of mindfulness. You observe your emotions rising and falling. You observe the fragility of the person standing before you, and you remind yourself of your Stoic principles. Their anger belongs to them, and it does not touch my core. This silence, filled with internal contemplation, is the brick with which the wall of psychological immunity is built. Every time you choose silence over explosion, your insulating layer grows thicker, and your ability to withstand life's tremors becomes deeper and more firmly rooted. You do not remain silent because you have nothing to say, but because you possess something far more precious than speech, your tranquility. The dark caveat: silence in the balance of cultures and differing interpretations. However, as we have grown accustomed to in this deep philosophical trajectory, we cannot take a piece of wisdom and apply it blindly without a careful reading of the surrounding context. Stoic philosophy is not a rigid template detached from reality. It is the art of wise adaptation. Here emerges a serious caveat that must not be overlooked. Silence is not a universal language with uniform meanings. It is an open text subject to highly contradictory interpretations across different cultures and social environments. In many of our societies, which breathe poetry and words and possess a rich heritage of folklore and inherited regional wisdom, eloquence of the tongue and quick-wittedness are seen as measures of strength and dignity. In such dynamic oral environments, your silence in the face of an attack may not be read as stoic wisdom or noble transcendence. Instead, it might be interpreted in two destructive directions. The first interpretation: silence as a sign of submission and weakness. The attacking party may think your silence is an admission of defeat, an expression of your cowardice, and proof of your inability to defend your space. This misinterpretation does not absorb their anger. On the contrary, it tempts them to go further. Like a predator seeing its prey surrender, your silence here may increase the other party's hostility and push them to escalate their abuse, believing they have established absolute control over you. The second interpretation: silence as the utmost degree of contempt and arrogance. In other cases, your calm silence might be interpreted as condescending disdain. When the other person is burning with anger and finds you looking at them with icy silence, their wounded ego might translate this scene into the phrase, "I am not even worth the effort of your response." This type of silence makes the other feel invalidated and marginalized, striking a fatal blow to their pride. Their passing anger then turns into deep-seated resentment and a doubled explosion as they try to shatter this imaginary arrogance they see in your features. The modern Stoic. Between passive silence and active silence. How then does the Stoic philosopher navigate this dilemma? How do they employ silence as a weapon to protect their energy without sparking additional fires due to cultural misinterpretation? The solution lies in transitioning from passive silence to active and vigilant silence. The Stoic does not withdraw from the scene, leaving their body like a wooden statue. Rather, their body and eyes speak clearly while their tongue remains still. Body language here is what directs the compass of interpretation. The gaze must be direct and steady, free of aggressive defiance, yet equally free of brokenness. The posture should be upright and relaxed, pulsating with confidence and calm, sending an unspoken message. I hear you. I am not afraid of you, but I refuse to participate in this emotional outburst. Moreover, the sage possesses the flexibility to blend the principle of boundary setting, discussed in Chapter 5, with the principle of silence. If, through their social intelligence, they realize that their cultural environment will translate prolonged silence as an additional provocation or a deliberate insult, they break this silence with a single, brief, calm, and decisive phrase to end the situation without engaging in an argument. They might say in a low, neutral tone, "I can see that you are very agitated right now. I will leave you to calm down and we can talk later," and then withdraw with dignity. With this measured step, they have protected their energy from being drained in a futile argument, absorbed the outburst of anger by avoiding escalation, and simultaneously blocked any cultural interpretations that might accuse them of weakness or arrogance. They use the word as a one-time shield, then return to take refuge in their impregnable fortress of silence, maintaining their inner peace amidst a world that never ceases its noise. 8. The alchemy of gratitude, recalibrating the compass of perception and overcoming the trap of toxic positivity. After mastering the art of silence and succeeding in extinguishing the fires of external provocation by transforming our inner fortress into a space of insulating stillness, a fundamental question arises. What do we do with this stillness? Silence empties the space and clears it of the noise of futile battles, but emptiness in itself is not the goal. Rather, it is a preparation to receive new energy. If we leave our inner castles empty after repelling the attacks of anger, the winds of resentment and nihilism might sneak back in. Here, Stoic philosophy presents its most profound and transformative tool, the active practice of gratitude, not as a social courtesy we repeat mechanically, but as an alchemical force that restructures our entire perception of reality. Resetting the mind, the filtering algorithm and separating signal from noise. Anger and annoyance at their deepest core stem from the illusion of lack. When we get angry, our minds focus intensely on what we lack, the respect we didn't receive, the appreciation withheld from us, the situation that didn't go as planned, or the gain that slipped through our fingers. In a state of annoyance, the mind acts like a magnifying glass, focusing its burning beam on the black holes in the canvas of our lives, while ignoring the vast expanses of light. In this context, gratitude acts as a radical reset for our cognitive system. The human mind, in moments of raging anger, is like a receiver picking up a massive amount of distorted signals and random noise that blurs the features of the greater human truth. Gratitude here is not merely a passing emotion. It is more like a precise algorithm for processing these conflicting signals. It intentionally filters out the noise of nothingness and the triggers of deprivation to amplify and highlight the pure, clear signal of existence. When you train your mind to practice gratitude amidst the storm of provocation, you are voluntarily shifting the helm of your focus. You withdraw your energy from the swamp of what is lacking in this situation and plant it in the soil of what is the inherent good here and now. The Stoic philosopher looks at their healthy body, the roof over their head, their ability to think logically, and the sheer blessing of existence itself, realizing that what they possess far outweighs what they think has been taken from them. This mental shift from a culture of scarcity to a culture of abundance pulls the rug out from under anger. For how can one fly into a rage over a trivial missing detail when fully consciously aware that they are swimming in an ocean of countless blessings. The dark side of the light, when gratitude becomes a poisoned sword. Up to this point, the picture seems ideal and consistent with the philosophical edifice we built in the previous chapters. However, as demanded by the intellectual honesty and realism that characterizes true Stoicism, we must dive into the most complex and painful territories of the human soul. What happens when the annoyance is not the result of a passing provocation or a superficial argument? What happens when the pain stems from a devastating loss, a tragedy that shakes one's core, the loss of a loved one who took a piece of the soul with them, or an illness that devours all reasons for hope? Here, the superficial advice to practice gratitude stands on an extremely dangerous edge, transforming into what modern psychology calls toxic positivity, demanding that a person bleeding from a deep wound in their soul look at the half-full glass, or smile and thank fate because things could have been worse, is an act devoid of the most basic degrees of human empathy and represents a crude distortion of Stoic wisdom. Toxic positivity is an oppressive attempt to deny legitimate, natural pain. It is forcing the self to wear a mask of false cheerfulness over features torn by grief. This suppression does not eliminate the pain. It buries it alive in the cellars of the subconscious, only to turn over time into intractable psychological complexes, chronic anger, and deep-seated bitterness toward oneself and the world. True Stoicism and the legitimacy of grief. Catharsis before restoration. One of the greatest historical fallacies about Stoic philosophy is depicting the Stoic philosopher as a deaf marble statue, feeling nothing and suffering no pain. The truth is that the Stoics clearly distinguished between destructive passions, pathe, like blind anger and panic, and natural and healthy feelings, propathei, as the initial innate reactions to loss. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wept bitterly at the loss of his friends, and he was not ashamed of his tears. Rather, he wrote offering condolences and comfort with words dripping with humanity and noble sorrow. The deeper lesson here is realizing the correct sequence of the healing process. You cannot plant the tree of gratitude in soil that has not first been plowed by the plow of grief. When true tragedy and painful loss strike, grief must be given its full, legitimate space. Tears must be allowed to wash away the gloom of loss, and the heart must be allowed to tremble and express its pain without judgment or a hasty attempt to suppress it in the name of toughness. This complete emotional release, catharsis, is an inevitable biological and psychological step. It is a venting of the pressure of pain before it explodes from within. Attempting to summon gratitude at the peak of trauma is an attempt to jump over the laws of human nature. Stoicism does not ask you to rejoice in the loss. It asks you not to allow this loss to destroy what remains of your humanity and virtues. The point of integration, gratitude as the culmination of the mourning process. When, then, does gratitude intervene in the context of true loss? It intervenes later, in the advanced stages of healing, after grief has taken its natural course and performed its purifying function. Here, gratitude does not come as a replacement for grief, but grows from within it like a flower emerging through cracks. After the cloud of deep pain clears, the disciplined mind begins to contemplate the nature of things. Epictetus teaches us not to say of anything we lose, "I have lost it," but rather, "I have returned it." Everything we possess in this life, including our loved ones, our status, and our glories, are in reality deposits we have borrowed from nature, and sooner or later they will be reclaimed. When we reach this elevated philosophical realization, grief merges with gratitude into a single, pure compound. We do not feel grateful because we lost those we love. We feel deeply grateful because fate granted us the opportunity to cross this life in their company, even if only for a temporary period. We are grateful for the beauty of the memories engraved in our souls, instead of drifting toward resentment because these memories did not last forever. With this long, extended understanding, gratitude becomes a formidable tool, not just for eliminating trivial daily anger, but for healing the deepest wounds of the soul. It protects us from the cruelty of the world and simultaneously protects us from our own cruelty toward ourselves in the name of false positivity. We accept our pains with the courage of the weak who know their humanity, and we are grateful for our blessings with the wisdom of the strong who realize that every flash of light in this existence is a gift worthy of a bow and reverence. 9. The alchemy of transformation, reframing criticism and shifting from the trench of the victim to the expanse of the learner. After cleansing ourselves of the impurities of resentment through the alchemy of gratitude and recalibrating the compass of our perception to see abundance amidst a world that boasts of lack, we now find ourselves ready to face one of the most complex psychological tests in our human journey. It is that moment when the bright spotlight of others is shone upon our flaws, the moment we receive criticism. Criticism has always been the earthquake that shatters the fortresses of human ego and the spark that ignites the fiercest fires of annoyance and anger. But Stoic philosophy is not content with merely repelling or ignoring criticism, as we discussed in previous stages. It goes much further and higher. It invites us to practice a kind of intellectual magic called reframing, the magic that transforms criticism from a poisoned dagger that stabs the self into a precise sculpting tool that refines the soul. From the victim's trench to the sage's podium, dismantling the inferiority complex. When we receive negative feedback, the first instinctive response for most human beings is to entrench themselves in the victim's trench. The victim mentality is a miserable psychological state in which a person completely merges their identity and self-worth with their actions and output. To the victim, saying, "This work is weak," translates immediately in the subconscious mind to, "You are a failure and do not deserve respect." This erroneous and lethal conflation turns every criticism into an attempted character assassination, prompting a full defensive mobilization, either through counterattack, presenting a flood of flimsy excuses, or emotional withdrawal and isolation. Here, the Stoic mind intervenes to create a cognitive break with this pattern. The philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius summarizes this mighty shift in his Meditations, saying, "If anyone can refute me, show me I'm making a mistake, or looking at things from the wrong perspective, I'll gladly change. It's the truth I'm after, and the truth never harmed anyone. What harms us is to persist in self-deceit and ignorance." Reframing simply means taking off the garment of the targeted victim and putting on the cloak of the eternal learner. The learner does not see an insult in criticism. They see free consultation. They view the critic's words, no matter how harsh, as precious data revealing blind spots their own eyes could not see. This shift not only eliminates annoyance, but it flips the equation, making you grateful to the one who saved you years of stumbling in the dark, thus making criticism the most effective fuel for the engine of personal growth. Dissecting criticism, the sorting dilemma, and the absence of criteria. Up to this point, the philosophical theorizing seems wonderful and ideal, but we would fall into the trap of oversimplification if we assume that every criticism directed at us is a heavenly gift to be embraced. We briefly touched in a previous chapter, when discussing lenses, upon the importance of distinguishing between the words of loved ones and those of abusers, but this distinction based on the identity of the speaker alone is not enough. What if the criticism comes from a co-worker we dislike, but who is professional? What if it comes from a manager with mixed intentions? The major obstacle faced by seekers of inner peace is their lack of objective criteria to filter the substance of the criticism itself. How do we differentiate between constructive criticism aimed at elevating us and toxic criticism specifically designed to break our will and crush our morale? Applied philosophy provides us here with a three-dimensional filter, consisting of precise and strict criteria to test any feedback we receive before allowing it into our inner fortress. The first criterion: dissecting the target, targeting the action versus character assassination. This is the first and most obvious fundamental difference. Purposeful and constructive criticism, no matter how strict or scathing, remains confined to the realm of action, performance, and behavior. It is criticism that fully maintains respect for your humanity but fiercely attacks the mistake you made. The constructive critic says, "The methodology you followed in this project was haphazard, your reaction in the meeting lacked professionalism, and this step caused a massive loss." Notice here that the words focus on what you did. Toxic criticism, on the other hand, bypasses the action to stab at being in identity. Its goal is not to fix the mistake, but to degrade the one who made it. The toxic critic will say in the same situation, "You are a chaotic person by nature, you are unfit to bear responsibility, and you are always a source of loss." This type of criticism uses absolute generalizations, always, never, failure, stupid, and turns a passing mistake into an eternal stigma attached to your core. When you spot this overstepping from action to identity, know immediately that you are facing psychological poison that must be rejected, not advice to be studied. The second criterion, the ultimate goal, illumination versus psychological domination. The second sorting criterion lies in reading between the lines to understand the deep psychological motive behind the critic's words. Constructive criticism hands you a lamp to see the road better. Its ultimate goal is to empower you and correct your course so you can become a better version of yourself. Even if the critic's language is dry, you ultimately feel that the objective is to push you forward. In stark contrast, toxic criticism does not aim to illuminate you. It aims to extinguish you so that the critic can stand out in the dark. The true goal of the toxic critic is to exercise psychological domination and exert influence. This critic uses criticism as a tool to make you feel inferior, confused, and dependent on them. They feed on shaking your self-confidence to nourish their own sense of superiority and importance. If you find that the feedback you receive leaves you feeling continuously crushed, paralyzed, and helpless, without offering any glimmer of hope for improvement, it is criticism aimed at breaking, not rectifying. The third criterion, the roadmap, actionability versus the maze of guilt. Criticism that is worth transforming yourself into a learner for is criticism that has a practical structure. Constructive criticism usually comes accompanied by a compass or a roadmap. The constructive critic is not content with demolishing the flawed structure. They suggest the materials needed for rebuilding. They tell you the mistake and hint at what is right, or at least ask questions that open your mind to discover solutions. It is actionable criticism. Toxic criticism, meanwhile, is merely a gratuitous demolition process. It throws you into a maze of guilt and shame without leaving you a thread to follow your way out. The toxic critic excels at telling you everything that is wrong with you, but becomes completely mute if you ask them, "So, how can I improve this?" Criticism that does not carry within it the seeds of correction is merely an aggressive complaint that has no place in the laboratory of the Stoic learner. Advanced Stoic alchemy, extracting gold from mud. But what if we face toxic criticism that attacks our being, aims to control us, offers no roadmap, yet despite all this darkness, contains a tiny percentage of truth? Here lies the highest level of Stoic practice. The ordinary mind will reject the criticism entirely and return the attack because of the filthy wrapper it was presented in. But the Stoic learner possesses the skill of cold detachment. They handle toxic criticism like someone handling a pile of mud that contains a speck of gold. With the coldness of a professional surgeon, the Stoic strips the words of their toxic emotional charge, ignores the tone of arrogance, and cancels out the veiled insults, keeping only the 1% of true data that reveals an actual flaw within them. They take this speck of truth to develop themselves, then throw the rest of the mud to the wind. With this stunning victory, the Stoic has deprived the toxic critic of the pleasure of harming them, while simultaneously stealing the truth they used as a weapon, making it a new foundation stone in building their inner fortress, which grows more impenetrable and loftier day by day. 10. The art of letting go, the engineering of memory and the profound liberation from the ghosts of the past. After fortifying our inner castles and learning how to reframe criticism in the present moment to extract the gold of truth, we now turn around to find ourselves facing an enemy of a different kind. This enemy does not attack from outside the walls. Rather, it dwells in the dark cellars of our minds. Much of the annoyance and anger that disturbs the peace of our daily lives has nothing to do with what is happening now, but is a distant echo of ended battles, past betrayals, and disappointments upon which the curtain has fallen. Here, Stoic philosophy confronts us with the greatest existential challenge, the art of letting go. It is an art without which the construction of the sage is incomplete, as they must face their heavy legacy and break free from the slavery of memory to embrace the expanse of the present. The illusion of time, the absurdity of dragging corpses into the land of the present. Stoicism teaches us that modern humanity lives a complex temporal tragedy. We are absent from our present, torn between anxiety over a future that has not yet arrived, and heartbreak over a past that cannot be changed. The philosopher Seneca brilliantly noted that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And a massive part of this imagination is our continuous rumination on the tapes of memory. When someone angers you today with a simple mistake, and you find yourself exploding at them with an emotion disproportionate to the event, your anger is not truly directed at them. You are using this person as a projection screen for your old anger at someone else who hurt you years ago. You are carrying the corpses of the past and dragging them with you into every new relationship and every new situation. This rumination turns the mind into a museum of grudges and pains, and the entire pure space of the present becomes polluted with the dust of yesterday. Letting go, therefore, in the Stoic perspective, is not a psychological luxury, but a fundamental condition for seeing clearly. How can you behold the beauty of the present moment if your eyes are covered in the ashes of the past? The myth of the magic button? Letting go is a decision versus letting go as a process. Here seeps in one of the most dangerous fallacies promoted by superficial self-help culture, which calls for the necessity to forget the past and move on, as if the human mind contains a delete button that can be pressed to erase pain in the blink of an eye. This naive, reductionist view turns letting go into a mere cold mental decision we make in a moment of enthusiasm, ignoring the complex structure of the human soul and psyche. Profound Stoic philosophy rejects this arbitrary erasure. Letting go is not amnesia, nor is it a decision we make in the morning to wake up the next day with our scars vanished. Letting go is a complex psychological and evolutionary process that requires precise internal engineering and sufficient time to complete. Attempting to jump over the past and ignore its pain without giving it its due understanding and comprehension is like trying to build a new floor on top of crumbling, decaying foundations. The building will look beautiful from the outside for a short while, but it will collapse at the first mild earthquake. Psychological processing, decoding signals, and filtering the noise of memory. To gain a deeper understanding of the true process of letting go, we can approach harsh past events as complex signals received by our minds. These signals contain overlapping frequencies. There is the loud, distorted frequency of emotional pain and anger, and there is the pure, clear frequency of the lesson or wisdom we must learn. The superficial decision to forget attempts to cut the signal entirely, depriving us of wisdom and leaving us vulnerable to repeating the same mistakes. What we truly need is what is known as processing. Processing is the philosophical and psychological algorithm through which we filter these signals. We sit with our painful memories, contemplate them courageously, and begin to isolate the emotional noise from the true data. This process takes time and requires several stages of continuous internal development. It begins with clear acknowledgement of the depth of the wound without arrogance, followed by the legitimate stage of mourning for what we lost, whether a person, an opportunity, or even our innocence and misplaced trust, culminating in the stage of extracting meaning. We do not erase the event. We strip it of its toxic emotional charge that enslaves us and transform it into mere archival information in the library of our experiences. The danger of being buried alive, the return of the repressed, and the revenge of unprocessed wounds. The most important warning in this chapter focuses on the devastating danger of ignoring the processing stage. When we decide to let go of past anger or trauma merely by locking the door tightly upon it without dismantling it, we do not kill it. Rather, we bury it alive in our subconscious. And as the strict laws of human psychology tell us, everything buried alive will return to the surface, but with far more hideous and terrifying faces. This is called the return of the repressed. The pain we refuse to process turns into a monster roaming the cellars of our Stoic fortress. It will later manifest as bouts of unjustified anxiety, emotional coldness and depression, angry outbursts for the most trivial reasons, or even chronic physical illnesses. Ignoring pain in the name of false strength is, in reality, the utmost degree of weakness, because it leaves the actual steering of our lives in the hands of the invisible ghosts of the past. The brave Stoic does not flee from their ghosts. They summon them to the courtyard of the castle, and under the light of reason and the sun, they converse with them until they melt away and voluntarily vanish. The supreme Stoic manifestation, the present as the only homeland and final refuge. After we grant ourselves the necessary time for deep psychological processing, and after we digest the pains of the past and extract the great philosophical meanings from them, we finally reach the peak of Stoic maturity, complete rootedness in the present. When processing is complete, the burden of the past falls from our shoulders naturally, not as a result of suppression or denial, but as a result of its purpose being fulfilled. The Stoic sage realizes with absolute certainty that the past is burnt paper that cannot be rewritten, and the future is a thick fog they have no power to dispel. The only space in which a person possesses absolute sovereignty, and the only stage where they can exercise their freedom, practice their virtues, and make their decisions, is the now. Letting go here is not an escape. It is a triumphant return to the true homeland, the present. You let go of the past so that you can be fully present with all your energy, awareness, and clarity of mind in this exact moment. When a provocative person confronts you now, you respond to them using only the wisdom of the moment, without accumulations, without prejudices, and without summoning old pains. Your response becomes pure, flexible, and free of any borrowed anger. With this profound art, the art of consciously processed letting go, the Stoic fortress transforms from a mere shield taking blows into a vast expanse of inner peace, renewed with every sunrise, carrying nothing from yesterday but its luminous lessons.